Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly onto the desert sands, long before the first tourist bus or the first camera flash, long before the world wakes up to argue about how the pyramids were actually built. In this gentle, cooling darkness, you stand beside me at the base of Khufu's Great Pyramid. A single line of sunlight is just beginning to paint the horizon, and for a moment, the whole desert seems to hold its breath. It feels like we're witnessing something that wasn't meant to be rushed. Something built for silence. The Great Pyramid looms above you, not as a postcard symbol, but as a mountain of intention, layered stone by stone, breath by breath, over decades. And tonight, in this long, soft journey designed to ease you into deep sleep, we're going to peel back the familiar story. Because the truth is, the version most of us grew up with is full of missing pieces. The reality behind these giants is stranger, more human, more chaotic, and in some places, more brilliant than the myths. And because this is history for sleep, we'll wander through every possibility without the stress of picking a side. You start by taking a slow breath, feeling the nighttime desert breeze brush over your arms. You notice how the pyramid's edges glow faintly as dawn approaches, how the light slides across each massive block. Historians still argue whether these blocks were hauled with perfect logistics or chaotic improvisation. Some claim the workers were geniuses of ancient engineering. Others think the project was barely held together with papyrus paperwork and stubborn optimism. The only thing everyone agrees on is that you're standing in front of something that wasn't supposed to survive this long. And yet here it is, older than Homer, older than Stonehenge, older than the concept of history itself. But before we dive deeper into everything you were never taught about how the pyramids were actually built, not what you think, not what Hollywood shows, not even what some textbooks still cling to, I need to do something YouTube requires, but we'll do it in the gentlest possible way. Support if you'd like, subscribe, or just drift off with me tonight. And if you're awake enough to type without dropping your phone on your face, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love mapping this sleepy little community across the globe. The desert brightens a little more. A warm breeze rolls in, carrying the faint smell of sand and earth. The pyramid's shadow stretches behind you like a doorway into another world. You can almost imagine the workers beginning their day 4,500 years ago, stretching, laughing, complaining about the heat, and preparing to move stones that weighed as much as buses. And so, with the sun finally touching the pyramid's west side, we begin this long journey together. No rush, no pressure, just soft steps into forgotten dust, old mysteries, and surprisingly human truths. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a slow step closer to the Great Pyramid, running your fingers along the limestone surface. The blocks feel warm even in the early light, as though they remember every century they've endured. And tonight, in this second chapter of our long, sleepy journey, you're going to discover something most people never hear, something that bends the timeline in a way that feels almost impossible. Some of the stone used in the pyramids was already ancient before Khufu was even born. Not carved, not shaped, not lifted, just ancient. This quiet truth isn't mystical or paranormal. It's geological. And surprisingly, it's one of the more grounding details in the entire story. You start with the limestone beneath your feet. It belongs to the Mokattam Formation, a layer of earth created around 50 million years ago when the region was underwater, part of the ancient Tethys Sea. If you kneel and look closely at certain blocks, you can spot tiny fossilized shells, creatures frozen in time, carried upward from ocean floors into the heart of a desert civilization. A strange, gentle reminder. Long before the pyramids reached for the sky, this place belonged to the sea. But here's where it gets even stranger. As you walk along the pyramid's base, you notice how the lower blocks are larger and more weathered. Some weigh 10 to 15 tons, far bigger than the blocks above. Archaeologists still debate whether these huge base stones were carved directly from bedrock, meaning they never moved at all, and the pyramid simply rose around them. Others argue they were moved, dragged from nearby quarries whose cut marks still scar the desert. But the argument isn't perfectly settled. Nothing about the pyramids ever is. A warm breeze rises, brushing sand past your ankles. You wander toward the plateau's edge, where quarries sit like fossilized scars in the earth. These quarries are the source of millions of blocks, each one shaped by copper chisels, pounding stones, and endless patience. Some blocks were extracted so cleanly that it looks like industrial machinery was involved, though it wasn't. Just technique, skill, and a workforce that practiced stone cutting every day for decades. As you watch the endless, silent landscape, you feel the weight of the labor behind it. Imagine waking every morning in a dusty workers' village, walking out to carve the same limestone formation again and again, the sound of tools ringing across the desert like a heartbeat. And yet, the pyramid builders also did something unusual, something historians still don't fully agree on. They mixed geological time with human ambition. Some of the reddish granite used higher inside the pyramid, especially in the king's chamber and the relieving chambers, came from Aswan, over 800 kilometers away, older than the limestone, harder than the limestone, and nearly impossible to cut with the tools available. The granite itself is about 600 million years old, a remnant of deep earth processes that have nothing to do with pharaohs, tombs, or cosmic symbolism. Yet somehow, this ancient stone ended up inside the most iconic human-made structure on Earth. You lean against a block, feeling its coolness fade with the rising sun. There's something comforting about this idea, that humans touched something truly ancient, reshaped it, and used it to build something meant to last far into the future, toward us, toward tonight, toward the quiet moment you and I are sharing right now. But here's the first real academic cliffhanger of the night. Historians still argue whether some stone blocks were reused from earlier, forgotten structures. This is not fringe speculation. Some Egyptologists believe older monuments may have stood on this plateau long before Khufu, possibly small mastabas or early experiments in monument building. If that's true, then the workers might have repurposed older stones, giving them new purpose in the Great Pyramid. Others think this idea is unnecessary and unsupported. They argue that the Egyptians quarried everything fresh and that the apparent reused look is just weathering or later repair work. The debate continues, like an unending scholarly tug-of-war. You take another deep breath. The air is warmer now. The wind is soft. The desert feels timeless, and in this silence, the ancient stones standing around you no longer seem like construction materials. They seem like actors in a much older story, one that began long before humans looked up and imagined gods living in the stars. And as you keep walking, your footsteps sinking slightly into the sand, you sense that the real mystery of the pyramids isn't about aliens or lost civilizations. It's about how humans interacted with time itself, lifting stones older than continents, shaping them with tools that seemed too humble for the task, and arranging them into a monument designed to defy erosion, earthquakes, invasions, and oblivion. You pause as sunlight finally spills across the face of the pyramid. The stone glows gold. The shadow behind you stretches long and thin, pointing toward the empty desert. There's a subtle hum to the moment, like the landscape is remembering every phase of its existence. And you realize something simple, something almost soothing. The stones were ancient. The workers were human. And the result was something neither could have created alone. Your journey continues, and the deeper you go, the more the story refuses to follow a straight line. But for now, you just let the warmth sink in. You let the sand drift. You let the centuries settle softly around you like a blanket. And without rushing, you move on. The sun climbs a little higher, warming your shoulders as you turn away from the pyramid and begin walking toward the hazy outline of the Nile Valley. Even from this distance, you can almost sense the river's presence, like a slow, ancient pulse running through the desert. It's easy to forget, standing here in all this dryness, that the pyramids were never really built in the desert. They were built beside a moving, life-giving highway made of water. The Nile was the real engine behind the pyramids. Not aliens, not forgotten technologies, not supernatural shortcuts, just water, and the people who understood how to use it. You imagine the world 4,000 years ago, the landscape transformed each year by the inundation. When the river flooded, it wasn't a peaceful little rise. Entire fields disappeared underwater. Villages relocated seasonally. The plateau near Giza became more accessible by boat than by foot. And this is why so many Egyptologists insist that stone transport wasn't a desert march at all. It was a river journey. You take slow steps in the sand, and the heat deepens around you. In your mind, you begin to picture the riverbank bustling with activity. Hundreds of men reinforcing wooden boats, stacking supplies, loading tools, repairing ropes. The smell of resin and freshly cut wood fills the air. Oxen grunt in the background. Children chase each other between racks of drying linen sails. The whole shoreline becomes a stage where the pyramid's construction really began. And here's something fascinating, an actual historical fact that feels like a detail from a forgotten novel. The Egyptians engineered flood canals specifically to bring stone directly from quarries to the construction site. Some canals fed from the Nile. Some curved behind the plateau. Some ran right up to the pyramid itself. Or, at least, this is the current best guess. Because, as always, there's a debate. Archaeologists have uncovered traces of ancient channels near Giza, including a possible harborside basin where boats once docked. But scholars disagree on how deep the water reached, how wide the channels were, and whether the canals remained stable enough year after year. Some claim the Nile's floodplain was much closer to the pyramids than it is today. Others argue the water never reached far enough to make transport effortless. And then there are researchers who believe the Egyptians artificially extended river channels, carving them through bedrock and maintaining them seasonally. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, a mixture of natural water routes and human modification. You pause at the thought of that. People shaping the desert, coaxing water through stone, forcing the landscape to obey their vision. There's something strangely soothing about imagining workers guiding heavy barges along quiet canals, moving slowly but steadily toward the pyramid's growing outline. Another warm breeze rolls in, and with it comes a peculiar curiosity, a detail you might not expect. Some scholars believe the large rectangular pits near the Great Pyramids, often interpreted as symbolic solar boats, may also represent the size and design of actual transport barges used during construction. These pits aren't small. They aren't decorative. They're specific, measured, intentional. And while their primary purpose is ceremonial, they also mirror the dimensions of barges capable of carrying 20 to 40-ton granite blocks. It's as if the Egyptians left a literal blueprint in the sand, part mythology, part engineering manual. You continue walking, imagining the rhythm of oars on water. Picture crews singing word chants as they ferry limestone from Tura and granite from Aswan. See the overseers standing on elevated decks, checking scrolls, calculating angles, counting loads. The boats themselves glide through the water, propelled not only by manpower but by the gentle current of the Nile working in their favor. At this stage in the journey, the pyramid wasn't built on sweat alone. It was built on timing. Transport had to be meticulously synchronized with the river's flood cycles. Too early, and the channels weren't deep enough. Too late, and workers would be stranded in drying mud. The schedule depended on celestial observations, agricultural patterns, and state-level planning that would put modern logistics to shame. And here comes tonight's academic moment, the ongoing debate that refuses to disappear. Historians still argue about the exact path stones traveled from the river to the pyramid. Some believe a long, straight canal extended directly to the base of the Giza Plateau. Others picture a complex network of smaller channels, branching like veins. A few suggest a harborside pool where dozens of boats docked simultaneously. And then there's the fringe but interesting idea that the entire plateau was temporarily flooded to reduce friction and allow stones to be floated closer to the site. You let the different possibilities drift through your mind like waves. None of them ruin the story. None of them diminish the achievement. If anything, the uncertainty adds a strange serenity to the narrative. It allows the imagination to fill in the cracks with soft possibilities. You begin to picture yourself aboard one of those ancient boats. The air is thick with humidity. The water reflects the sky like a shifting mirror. Workers chant in unison as they adjust the ropes, holding a huge limestone block in place. Birds fly overhead. Ibis, herons, and kites circling above the channels. Papyrus reeds rustle along the banks. In the distance, the Great Pyramid rises slowly, each level glowing with the promise of what it will become. For a moment, it doesn't feel like construction. It feels like pilgrimage. The river carries you forward, just as it carried millions of stones across centuries. You feel a faint rocking motion, even though you're standing still in the desert. Like your mind has boarded that barge and is drifting along the calm water, guided by ancient hands. Hands that worked not for fame, not for gold, but for something far stranger, something that still reaches us today. You inhale deeply, letting the scene settle in your imagination. The river fades from your mind. The desert returns, but the sense of movement lingers like a soft balance between stillness and motion. And now the journey carries you forward again. The morning sun strengthens, and as you walk closer to the shadowed cuts in the Giza Plateau, the world around you begins to shift. The breeze thins. The air grows heavier. Sand whispers across the ground. And suddenly, it feels as though you've stepped, not into a desert, but into a workshop without walls, stretching all the way to the horizon. This was the heart of pyramid making. Not the ramps, not the mysterious chambers, not the secret astronomical alignments, just cutting stone. And tonight, as the warmth settles across your skin, you're about to discover why something so simple was also one of the most astonishing feats of the ancient world. You move toward a cluster of exposed limestone ledges, some rough, some smooth, some half-carved, as if the workers simply took a lunch break and never came back. If you place your palm on the stone, the surface feels almost velvety, weathered by centuries of wind. But beneath that softness lies a detail that still confuses newcomers. The Egyptians used copper tools to carve millions of limestone blocks, not bronze, not iron, not diamond-tipped drill bits, just copper, one of the softest usable metals. You stand quietly, letting your mind try to reconcile this. A civilization capable of building the Great Pyramid, using a metal softer than your modern kitchen knife. Yet somehow they made it work. You walk forward, and the air fills with imagined noise, the rhythmic clack of pounding stones, the scraping of copper chisels, the grunts of men swinging mallets made from acacia wood. These sounds existed here for decades, drifting across the desert like a constant metallic heartbeat. Here's the well-known fact for this section, the foundation of it all. Limestone, especially the local Giza variety, is soft enough that copper tools can shape it effectively, if you continually hammer the tools back into form. That's the key. They didn't carve effortlessly. They carved relentlessly. Tools dulled after minutes. Edges bent and warped. Workers had to stop repeatedly to sharpen or reshape each chisel. Thousands of copper tools were in rotation at any given time. Picture that for a moment. Toolmakers in small tents, heating copper, hammering, cooling, sharpening, and repeating the same cycle every day for decades. This isn't just engineering. It's endurance. You kneel near a half-cut trench in the bedrock. Tool marks still cover the walls, forming rows of shallow, vertical striations. Some marks are smooth, others jagged. Egyptologists recognize these shapes instantly, each one a signature of the techniques used. Workers used 3 primary tools: copper chisels for detail, dolomite pounding stones for rough carving, wooden mallets to strike the chisels. Dolomite, a type of hard limestone, was crucial. It was harder than copper by far, and Egyptians used it to break down large surfaces. Imagine swinging a stone on a stick at the bedrock for hours under the sun. That was their reality. And yet, the result was astonishingly precise. You move closer to a particularly smooth ledge, running your hand down its edge. It's straighter than you expected, almost unnervingly so. Some archaeologists argue that the Egyptians may have occasionally used abrasive materials like quartz sand to polish edges or help shape details. Others think the pounding stones alone were sufficient. But here comes your academic debate line, just as the section demands. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians used copper saws and tubular drills filled with sand to cut granite blocks. This is one of the hot topics at archaeological conferences. Some researchers point to cut grooves in Aswan granite that resemble psalm marks. Others say natural weathering created those patterns. Some claim the Egyptians used quartz sand inside copper tubes, which would slowly grind away the stone. Others think the energy required would be too great and the results too inconsistent. No clear consensus, no definitive proof, just questions layered over questions. As you walk deeper through the carved landscape, you find smaller blocks discarded near the edges, chunks rejected for imperfections. This leads you into a soft curiosity, one that brings a little smile to your face. According to old work logs found at Deir el-Medina and similar sites, Egyptian workers sometimes named their tools. Not dramatically, nothing like crusher of stone or blade of the pharaoh. Mostly practical nicknames. Little biter, stubborn one, cold fish. Names that probably came from frustration, humor, and the kind of camaraderie that grows when you spend your entire life hitting rocks under the sun with your friends. You imagine a crew leader shouting, "Where's Little Biter? I just sharpened it." And someone sheepishly pointing to the sand. It rolled away again. You step away from the quarry and look back. Now that you understand the tools, the scene transforms. You can picture the workers lining up their chisels in the morning, scribes marking which crew finished which section, supervisors inspecting the angles, apprentices learning by watching their uncles or fathers strike the stone with practiced precision. And something about this picture calms you. It turns the pyramids from impossibilities into achievements. Not supernatural, not impossible, just human effort, amplified across thousands of lives. You continue walking, and a warm gust of wind moves across the desert, lifting a thin layer of sand and setting it down gently again. In that soft motion, you realize something important. This entire process, stone extraction, shaping, sharpening, lifting, hauling, wasn't a mystery to the Egyptians. It wasn't magic. It wasn't lost knowledge. It was everyday life. The workers didn't wonder how they would build the pyramid. They simply did the next step, then the next, then the next. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, millions of blows from copper tools grew into the largest stone structure on Earth. You take a deep breath, letting the thoughts settle in your chest. The desert is quiet now. The traces of ancient labor fade into the warm morning air. You turn back toward the pyramid, its huge blocks glowing gold in the rising sun. Now you understand one more piece of it, one more layer of the puzzle, and the journey continues. You walk along the edge of the plateau, and the desert stretches out before you in a shimmering gold haze. The Great Pyramid towers behind you, its presence pressing gently against your back like a silent reminder. There's still so much you don't know. And Section 5 is where we step into the most argued-over part of the entire pyramid story, the ramps. There is no single topic that divides Egyptologists more. Not aliens, not lost civilizations, not mysterious chambers. Ramps, just ramps. Simple, earthy, dusty, but endlessly controversial. You walk further and imagine the plateau transformed into a bustling construction zone. Dust clouds rise as crews shovel sand, pack clay, drag sledges, and carve channels into the bedrock. Overseers point, scribes keep tally, and workers follow orders in choreographed movement. The air is thick with labor, and somewhere in this seeming chaos, the question emerges. How do they get multi-ton blocks up a pyramid that grew taller every week? You pause in the heat and let your mind wander through the four main ramp theories. Each one plausible, each one flawed, each one still debated in conference halls and academic journals. 1. The straight ramp theory. The simplest idea. A massive straight ramp rising directly toward one face of the pyramid. You picture it hundreds of meters long, so long it stretches past what your eyes can track. Workers pull ropes, teams push sledges, and the slope remains shallow enough that humans can handle the load. The problem? A ramp long enough for a 147-meter pyramid would be absurdly, monstrously huge, even larger than the pyramid itself. Some calculations suggest it would require more material than the entire Great Pyramid. So you walk forward, imagining scholars shaking their heads politely at conferences, saying things like, interesting but impractical, which is academic language for no way that happened. Still, some believe in it, because the Egyptians were not afraid of large projects. Not at all. 2. The zigzag or switchback ramp. You move your hand in the air, tracing the imaginary path. A ramp that climbs the pyramid in a series of tight turns, hugging the outer walls like a hiking trail on a cliffside. This design uses less material. It's easier to maintain. It keeps crews close to their work. But then someone asks the dreaded question, how do you turn a 50-ton block around a corner? And suddenly the theory wobbles. You smile slightly. Egyptology is full of theories that make sense, until someone points out gravity exists. 3. The spiral ramp. You close your eyes and imagine a wide, gentle path circling the pyramid's exterior like a ribbon wrapped around a gift. Workers push stones upward in a slow spiral. The view from above is hypnotic. Some Egyptologists love this idea. Others hate it, because the evidence doesn't cooperate. If a spiral ramp existed, it would have left cut marks or foundational traces on the outer casing stones. And so far, none have been found. But then again, the outer casing stones were stripped off long ago. So maybe the evidence is simply missing. You feel a soft gust of wind brush your cheek, like the desert shrugging. 4. The hidden internal ramp. This one is the favorite of modern documentaries and late-night debates. A ramp inside the pyramid, spiraling upward in a square-shaped tunnel, invisible from the outside. It's elegant. It's clever. It solves the turning problem, and it produces fewer external traces. You walk past a cluster of archaeologists and engineers in your imagination, gesturing excitedly around 3D models like caffeinated tour guides. But critics raise a hand and say, if there was an internal ramp, where are the access points? Where are the ventilation shafts? Where is the debris removal path? No clear answers. No smoking hieroglyph. Which brings you to your required academic debate line. Historians still argue whether the internal ramp theory has any archaeological evidence at all, or if it's just an elegant modern guess. Some say microgravity scans show anomalies in the pyramid's mass consistent with internal voids. Others say the anomalies could be anything: structural gaps, known chambers, or simple measurement noise. So this theory floats gently in the scholarly realm. Not disproven, not proven, just drifting. A curiosity in the dust. As you keep walking, you stumble upon a strange detail, one that always surprises people. Some ancient graffiti found near quarry sites shows simple sketches of ramps and sledges, drawn by workers themselves. They're crude, they're small, they're barely artistic, but they show one thing clearly. Egyptians did use ramps, just not which kind, not which size, not which configuration, which makes them both helpful and maddening. You imagine a tired worker in the Old Kingdom casually doodling a pyramid ramp on a limestone chip, never realizing future scholars would zoom in on it like it contained the secrets of the universe. A scene of moving stone. You return mentally to the heat of construction. Sand dunes shift. Workers chant in unison. Dozens of men pull ropes thick as your wrists. Sledges creak. Sweat darkens linen kilts. Supervisors shout rhythm cues to keep teams synchronized. You imagine the wooden sleds gliding over sand that has been dampened, just enough to cut friction in half. A trick proven experimentally in modern times. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel the vibration in the ropes. Almost hear the crunch of sand under sleds. Almost sense the weight of each block. Ramps were not the mystery. The scale was. Thousands of men, hundreds of sledges, millions of stones. and a society organized so tightly that decades of labor could be coordinated like a symphony. The gentle cliffhanger, and then you look up, way up, toward the pyramid's summit. Even if you accept ramps for the lower blocks, the final tiers still seem almost impossible. Some Egyptologists believe the ramps became narrower and steeper near the top. Others think cranes made from wooden frames helped lift blocks vertically. Others imagine scaffolding hugging the sides. But no theory explains everything. Every idea has a missing piece, a soft, puzzling gap. And as you stand there, the wind curling around your legs, the desert warm and bright, you sense that this is one of those mysteries designed to stay unresolved just long enough to keep the story alive. The ramps are still there, in the sand, in the quarries, in the graffiti, in the imaginations of every engineer who ever tries to reverse engineer a miracle of human determination. And your journey continues. The heat deepens around you as you continue across the plateau, and the air takes on that shimmering quality you see above hot asphalt in summer. But instead of cars and concrete, you're surrounded by ancient stone, drifting sand, and a silence that somehow feels heavier than the sunlight. And this is the perfect place to uncover one of the most surprising truths in all of pyramid construction. Wet sand. Just wet sand. Not lost technology. Not mysterious supermaterials. Not secret anti-gravity devices. Just water dripped onto sand at the perfect moment in the perfect amount. As you walk along the slope of an old quarry ramp, you imagine thousands of men pulling huge limestone blocks on wooden sledges. You've already explored the ramp debate, but tonight, in this slow, drifting journey meant to ease you towards sleep, we're focusing on something far more modest and far more powerful. You crouch and scoop a handful of sand into your palm. Let it run between your fingers like powder. Dry sand shifts, collapses, and resists heavy weight. You know this instinctively, but dampen it just slightly, and everything changes. Workers discovered that adding just the right amount of water reduces the friction of dry sand by roughly 50%. Modern experiments confirm this. Physicists tested sledges on dry sand, damp sand, and wet sand. Dry sand was chaotic, resisting the motion of the sled. Wet sand turned into mud and slowed everything. But damp sand? That was the sweet spot. The ancient hack. You rise slowly, brushing your hands off, and picture crews of workers walking ahead of each sledge, carrying jars and buckets, sprinkling water in rhythmic arcs across the pathway. Not too much, not too little, just enough to give the sand a cohesive structure that allowed sledges to glide. This is your well-known historical fact for the section. Archaeological paintings from tombs show workers pouring water in front of sledges to help move statues and stone blocks. Clear, direct, unmistakable. It's painted right there on ancient walls. A little detail that rewrites everything we assume about pyramid construction. And here's where your curiosity enters. Soft and unexpected. Some Egyptologists believe there were specialists whose entire job was to judge the ideal moisture level of sand. The water sprinklers, if you want a modern nickname. Their expertise wasn't in engineering or mathematics. It was in reading the desert, knowing when the sand needed another sprinkle, knowing how the texture should feel under their feet, understanding the difference between too dry, too wet, and perfect, a skill learned from childhood, a craft passed down for generations, an intuition modern scientists needed lab equipment to decode. You walk along the imagined ramp now, and suddenly the movement all makes sense. The chanting workers, the rhythmic pulling, the sand being dampened ahead of the load. It wasn't magic. It was teamwork, observation, and simple physics executed with astonishing consistency. And now comes the academic debate line for this section. Historians still argue whether wet sand alone explains the movement of granite blocks from Aswan, or whether additional sled designs, lubricants, or rollers were also used. Granite, being harder and heavier than limestone, raises questions. Some scholars think the same wet sand method would work. Others insist granite sledges required wooden runners coated in animal fat. A third group points at possible wooden rollers for short distances, though evidence is limited. The debate continues, as debates always do. But while academics argue, you imagine the workers themselves not overthinking it all. They simply did what worked. You continue walking through the imagined construction site. Teams move in coordinated rows. Foremen shout rhythmic cues. Pull, pull, pull. Overseers follow with scrolls balancing on their palms, tracking progress like human clipboards. Along the path, men sprinkle water with perfect timing, creating shimmering dark stripes on the sand. The desert wind carries tiny droplets away, sparkling like dust motes in the light. The air smells faintly of wet earth, a smell you rarely associate with Egypt. You picture how refreshing that scent must have been after hours under the brutal sun. And, as odd as it sounds, there is something soothing about imagining this simple act of cooperation. Wet sand meeting wooden sledge. Human force meeting friction. Science meeting instinct. You walk further, and the environment shifts again. Now you're approaching the base of the pyramid. Teams position themselves in careful rows. Ropes wrap around blocks like giant muscle fibers. Workers dig their heels into the sand, leaning backward with all their weight. You can almost feel the subtle tremor in the ground as a block begins to slide. Slowly, reluctantly, but undeniably moving forward. This is the moment that built a civilization. Not the glamorous hauling to dizzying heights, not the final placement of capstones, but the everyday grind of moving stones one careful meter at a time. You take a deep breath, letting the rhythm of that thought wash over you. Because in a world where the pyramids often feel like mysteries wrapped in more mysteries, wet sand offers something rare. A solution grounded in real people, real labor, and real physics. Nothing supernatural, nothing impossible, nothing requiring forgotten technology or mythic civilizations. Just humanity, organized, determined, tired, sunburned, but persistent. And the best part? That persistence worked. You reach the end of the imagined ramp, standing just a few steps away from where the blocks were raised onto the next level. The breeze is warmer now. The air tastes like sunlight. And slowly, you feel the story pull you deeper into the heart of the pyramid's creation. The stones were moved. The sand was dampened. The ropes held. And the structure grew. Your journey continues. Quietly, steadily, just like the construction itself. You leave the imagined ramps behind and begin walking toward a quieter corner of the plateau, where the wind carries fewer voices and the desert feels strangely lived in. Not in the tourist sense, not in the modern sense at all, but lived in by thousands of people whose names never appear in textbooks, whose faces were never carved into temple walls, and whose stories remain buried in the sand for more than 4,000 years. And this is where you discover one of the most surprising truths in all of pyramid history. One that flips the old myth completely on its head. The pyramid workers were not slaves. You step into the excavated remains of their settlement, a place archaeologists simply call Height El Ghurab, the lost city of the pyramid builders. It's quiet now, reduced to stone outlines and faint traces of walls. But if you let your imagination wander, you can rebuild it in your mind. Dusty streets, circular bread ovens glowing like red suns, rows of small barracks where crews slept, workshops full of tools, ropes, baskets, and chipped-off flakes of limestone, communal dining halls where bread and beer flowed endlessly, doctors' huts, scribes' offices, even small cemeteries for honored workers. A whole city living in the shadow of the pyramid. You pause and take in a slow breath as the wind slides over the ruins. There's warmth here, something human, something real. It softens the myth and sharpens the truth. The workers ate well, extremely well. You picture a kitchen crew preparing meals. Giant pots of barley stew, fresh fish from the Nile, onions, leeks, garlic, and endless quantities of bread. Excavations found huge cattle bones, sheep bones, and goat bones. Far more than poor laborers would ever have eaten. These people were fed better than most Egyptians of their time. Your well-known historical fact for the section. Records and remains show that pyramid workers consumed nearly 5,000 calories a day, including meat, bread, beer, and vegetables. Not prison rations. Not scraps. Rich, hearty meals. You walk beside the outlines of what used to be long galleries. Barracks where about 40 men per room slept side by side. You imagine the smell of sweat and dust, the muttered conversations, the snores rumbling like distant thunder. And yet, there was dignity here. Workers were organized into crews, teams, and fills, each with its own identity. Some teams even had playful names such as the Friends of Khufu, written in red ink on stone blocks. Imagine lifting a 2-ton block and stamping it proudly with your team name, like a signature. A curiosity hidden in plain sight. As you continue wandering through the reconstructed village, you encounter something unexpected. A building that archaeologists interpret as a physician's house. Inside, they found surgical tools, pottery containing medicinal ointments, and bones showing signs of healed fractures. Workers who got injured weren't abandoned. They were treated, kept alive, cared for. And here's the curiosity for this section. Some skeletons show evidence of amputations that healed successfully, meaning these workers received long-term medical care. This wasn't slave labor. This was a civic workforce supported by the state. You walk further, and the sand swirls around your feet in gentle spirals. The shape of the city becomes clearer. A bustling hub of laborers, craftsmen, bakers, brewers, administrators, and support crews. Tons of bread baked daily. Thousands of liters of beer brewed weekly. Massive deliveries of livestock and grain arriving constantly. It feels less like forced labor and more like a national project, powered by pride, duty, and religious conviction. An academic debate in the dust. And now your required scholarly line. Historians still argue whether the workers were full-time professionals or farmers employed seasonally during the Nile flood. Some evidence suggests teams worked year-round. Other evidence points to rotation based on agricultural cycles. Some think both systems were used simultaneously. There is no single consensus, which means the worker village remains one of Egypt's most intriguing puzzles. Not because it's unsolved, but because it provides so many possible stories. A day in the life of a builder. You picture the morning routines. Crews waking at dawn, stretching beneath the rising sun, gathering simple linen kilts, wrapping ropes around their waists, and marching in clusters toward the construction ramps. Meanwhile, in the village, bakers knead dough, pounding it rhythmically. The smell of yeast and warm bread fills the air. Brewers stir giant vats of beer, foam bubbling over. Children run between buildings, carrying baskets of tools. Doctors check on the injured. Scribes record attendance, rations, and progress. It's a whole ecosystem designed to support the impossible. You walk past the old bakery remains. Archaeologists found enormous conical bread molds here, each one made from clay, lined up like tiny volcanoes. Imagine hundreds of them firing at once, feeding the crews. The heat, the smoke, the laughter of workers lined up for their daily ration. It wasn't misery. It was community. A strange, dusty, loud, determined community. Honor in the work. You step toward the modest cemetery discovered near the village. Some graves belong to overseers, others to middle-class workers, and some to ordinary laborers. They were buried with care, wrapped in linen, given small offerings, placed respectfully, not dumped into pits, not discarded. This single fact, this tender truth, overturns centuries of misunderstanding. No society buries slaves with respect. No society honors forced laborers with ritual offerings. These workers were valued, and the desert wind rises again, as if agreeing. You stand quietly, letting the realization settle. This wasn't a story of oppression. This was a story of national pride, religious devotion, and human resilience. The village supported the construction as much as the ramps did. Both were essential. Both were feats of organization. Both formed the backbone of the pyramid project. And as you leave the ancient settlement behind, you feel a warmth in your chest, a sense of closeness to the people who lived here, laughed here, ate bread and beer here, and died knowing they had helped raise something that would touch the sky long after their names faded. Your journey continues. The wind shifts subtly as you leave the workers' village behind, carrying with it the faint smell of sand heated to perfection. Ahead, the Great Pyramid looms taller with every step, its angled sides glowing in soft gold. But tonight, you're walking toward another often overlooked truth, one that rarely appears in movies or documentaries, even though it shaped every stone placed on this monumental structure. The pyramids were not built by brute force alone. They were built by engineers, men in simple linen kilts who did math by hand, geometry by instinct, and architectural calculations by eye. And as you wander closer to the heart of the plateau, you begin to picture them. Scribes with shaved heads and reed pens tucked behind their ears. Architects carrying wooden cubits marked with precise black lines. Surveyors with knotted ropes stretched taut under the morning sun. These weren't wizards or priests or mythical sages. They were bureaucrats with styluses, civil servants with geometry homework, people who spent more time arguing over angles than chanting to gods. You smile slightly at the idea that one of the most awe-inspiring structures in human history was essentially a massive government project involving paperwork, checklists, and very stressed middle managers. Architects of the Old Kingdom. You make your way toward the southeastern corner of the Great Pyramid, where foundations are flatter and cleaner. In your mind, a small group of architects kneel in the sand, mapping out measurements using wooden cubits, Egypt's standard unit of length. 1 cubit equals about 52.3 centimeters. It was divided into 7 palms, each palm into 4 fingers. Everything had to be measured. Everything had to align. Everything had to be exact. Your well-known historical fact for the section. The Great Pyramid is aligned to the cardinal directions with incredible precision. Its sides deviate from true north by only about 3 minutes of arcade. That's accuracy most modern buildings don't achieve. You picture an architect running his hand along the pyramid base, checking slight deviations, comparing them to markings on his papyrus scroll. The sun hits his shaved scalp like a spotlight as he squints, adjusts, recalculates, and mutters something that probably translates to ancient Egyptian for "we're going to need to redo that." Nearby, surveyors stretch a rope between wooden stakes. But this isn't just any rope. It's the famous rope stretcher's cord, used to define right angles using the 3:4:5 triangle method. And here comes a curiosity for this section, something many people never hear. The ancient Egyptians may have independently discovered the 3:4:5 triangle centuries before Pythagoras, not as an abstract theorem, but as a practical trick for marking a perfect right angle in the desert sand. You watch a rope stretcher kneel at the corner of the future pyramid, adjusting the rope's knots until the error disappears. He nods. Another rope stretcher signals approval. 2 more check the line. Then the architect signs off, stamping his approval on a mud tablet. Simple, precise, human, planning the interior. You walk around the pyramid's side and imagine the architects discussing the internal layout. Shafts, relieving chambers, descending corridors, ascending passages. You can almost hear them debating in low, intense voices. Should the passage angle be 26 degrees? What if we shift the king's chamber 2 cubits west? Do we widen this corridor or narrow it? The Great Pyramid isn't hollow, but it isn't solid either. It's a carefully balanced system of voids and chambers, all designed to redistribute weight and maintain stability, which leads directly into your academic debate line. Historians still argue whether the relieving chambers above the king's chamber were intentional architectural innovations, or simply practical solutions that weren't meant to be symbolic at all. Some scholars say the chambers were early experiments in load-bearing design. Others argue they were essential engineering choices from the beginning. A few suggest they were symbolic spaces representing creation myths. Nobody fully agrees, which is exactly the energy you expect from engineers across any century. The master builder, and then there's the figure who stands above the rest. Legendary architect Himyanu, believed by many to be the mastermind behind the Great Pyramid. You imagine him walking across the plateau, papyrus scroll in hand, squinting against the glare as he reviews progress. His title was high-ranking, overseer of all construction projects of the king. He wasn't just checking stone quality. He was checking schedules, rations, manpower, alignment, material flow, and the morale of thousands of workers. He was the project manager of project managers, the ancient world's ultimate civil engineer. But here's a small curiosity. Himeyunu's tomb contains a life-size statue showing a stocky man with a confident expression, not a mystical sage, not a frail scholar, but a practical, sturdy, slightly stressed engineer who looks like he spent decades supervising stone blocks under the sun. You can almost hear him sighing. No, not that angle. This angle. Yes, like that. No, gently. Tools of thought. You picture the engineers and architects' tools laid out neatly on a woven mat. Wooden cubit rods scratched with precision marks. Knotted surveying ropes. Plumb bobs carved from stone. Wooden levels with string indicators. Papyrus scrolls covered in neat ink lines. Small pots of red and black pigment for marking stones. There's something calming about the simplicity of these tools. You don't need futuristic machines to create miracles. Just discipline, cleverness, and a lot of coordinated teamwork. A sleepy reflection. You pause in the warming air and close your eyes. There is something inherently soothing about imagining ancient engineers working through the same problems modern engineers face. What if the support fails? How do we calculate load? Do we have enough workers today? Why is my rope crooked? Who moved my cubit rod? It makes the pyramid feel less like a divine mystery and more like a testament to human consistency, our stubbornness, our creativity, our desire to make something that lasts. And as you stand once more in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, its perfect alignment catching the morning sun, you feel a soft wave of appreciation wash over you. Not for the pharaoh, not for the gods, but for the engineers in linen kilts, ink-stained hands, sore feet, and endless patience. Without them, nothing else in this story would exist. Your journey continues. The morning sky above Giza grows brighter, but your mind drifts toward a time when this same sky looked very different. No city lights, no pollution, just stars, sharp, bright, overwhelming stars, stretching across the heavens like an intricate map. And in this chapter, you discover something quietly breathtaking. The Egyptians didn't just look at the stars. They built with them. As you step into a flatter part of the plateau, the breeze cools. The hum of ancient life fades, replaced by something softer, something like cosmic silence. It feels almost sacred, even though this is simply a patch of desert. But 4,000 years ago, priests and astronomer architects gathered here at night, laying ropes in the sand, aligning stakes, and carefully observing the movement of the sky. You imagine them wrapped in linen cloaks against the nighttime chill, watching the slow rotation of the heavens with patient, trained eyes. Their goal wasn't mystical. It was practical, mathematical, architectural. Your well-known historical fact arrives early in this section. The Great Pyramid is oriented almost perfectly to true north, more accurately than any other ancient structure on Earth. Not pretty close, not roughly aligned, nearly perfect. You imagine one of the astronomer priests standing at a marked point on the ground, tracking a star across the sky as it moves due north. His apprentice holds a plumb line. Another draws marks in the sand. It's a quiet ritual, but not a religious one. A measurement ritual. And here's your curiosity, something that's both humble and elegant. They likely used the circumpolar star transit method, watching two stars circle the sky and bisecting their positions to find true north. The names of these stars have changed with time, but the technique remains scientifically sound even today. You lift your head and imagine the night sky of the Old Kingdom. Thousands of stars visible to the naked eye. The Milky Way arching over the desert like a luminous bridge. Orion rising sharply over the horizon. Sirius shimmering near the eastern edge. You picture them all reflected in the imagination of Egypt's early architects. The Orion connection. Now you walk slowly toward the pyramid's northern face, and your mind drifts to one of the most famous and controversial Ideas in Egyptology. The Orion correlation theory. It suggests the three pyramids of Giza were laid out to mimic the three stars of Orion's belt. Some scholars support it. Some dismiss it. Some agree partially and argue the alignment isn't exact. But regardless of how neatly the stars match the layout, there's no denying the Egyptian fascination with Orion. In their cosmology, Orion represented Osiris, the god of rebirth and the afterlife. A connection between the pharaoh and the stars was natural, even expected. It was part of the royal journey, part of the cosmic choreography. You imagine priests watching Orion rise each winter morning, marking time with star alignments, chanting softly as the constellation ascends. The stars weren't decorative or symbolic. They were functional. They measured seasons, guided rituals, and anchored architecture. The subtle architecture of the sky. You pause again, letting the warm air wrap gently around you. The horizon glows gold. The pyramid casts a precise shadow. And now you lean into the required academic debate line, the heartbeat of every section. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians intentionally aligned ventilation shafts in the king's chamber with specific stars, or whether the alignments are coincidental. Some claim the shafts point directly to Orion and Sirius at the time of Khufu. Others say the alignments are too rough to be purposeful. A few believe the shafts had practical roles first and celestial roles only incidentally. The debate is gentle, almost sleepy, perfect for this quiet moment. Drawing blueprints with light. You picture the architects gathering at dusk, laying ropes in straight lines guided by the rising stars. Their movements are patient, deliberate. They check the angle, adjust the line, check again the next night. Mark progress on papyrus. They didn't use computer simulations, satellite imagery, or laser levels. They used patience, repetition, and the slow, eternal turning of the sky. You smile at the thought. How something so vast, so cosmic, so infinite, guided something so tangible, so grounded, so earthly. You picture a master architect whispering to his apprentice, "Build as the heavens move." And the apprentice nods, tracing lines in the sand that mirror the stars overhead. A night on the plateau. The sun brightens around you, but your imagination gently reframes the scene into nighttime. You sit on the warm sand. 1,000 stars shimmer above. A line of torches flickers in the distance. You hear the murmur of priests debating star paths. You hear the rustle of cloth as scribes mark the sky's midpoint with a stroke of ink. The desert, often thought of as empty, becomes a cosmic observatory. You close your eyes and hear nothing but the faint hum of wind over the plateau. A soft, rhythmic pulse, a natural metronome. And in that silence, you catch a small truth. The pyramids weren't just built on Earth. They were built between Earth and sky, a collaboration between stone and starlight. The gentle continuation. As you stand and dust sand from your hands, you take one more glance toward the heavens. Even though the stars are now hidden by daylight, their influence remains, woven into the angles of every block. It doesn't matter which theory you favor, whether the Egyptians intended star mirrors, cosmic maps, or simply used the sky as a practical tool. What matters is that the pyramids rise from a marriage of geometry and astronomy, a quiet dance between human intention and cosmic order. And with that realization settling warmly into your chest, you continue walking, the journey deepening with every step. By now, the desert heat has ripened into its full strength, but as you walk closer to the pyramid's base again, something strange happens. The air thickens, not with dryness, but with imagined movement, a kind of gentle, rhythmic pressure that seems to vibrate through the sand. And then you realize what it is. The sound of 10,000 hands, callous palms gripping ropes, dust-covered fingers shaping stone, bare feet crunching against sand. A human rhythm, steady, ancient, relentless. This is the chapter where the pyramid finally becomes more than stone and theory. It becomes motion, a system, a choreography performed by thousands of synchronized bodies under the open sky. You stop where the plateau widens, imagining yourself on a raised lookout point. From here, the entire construction site unfolds below you as if you're watching a living diagram. Rows of workers pull sledges in unison. Stonecutters hammer to a percussive beat. Haulers march in lines, ropes coiling around their shoulders like serpents. Overseers clap in slow, rhythmic counts, a human metronome guiding every movement. And from above, it doesn't look chaotic. It looks coordinated. You take a breath and let the imagined murmurs fill your ears. A workforce of specialists. This wasn't just a crowd of workers doing the same job. It was a fine-tuned machine composed of specialists. Your well-known historical fact enters here. Workforces were divided into crews, fills, gangs, and teams, each with defined roles, responsibilities, and even team names. There were stonecutters who shaped blocks, transport crews who hauled sledges, levelers who ensured each course was flat, setters who aligned and placed blocks, rope makers who crafted thick cables for flax, tool sharpeners who worked nonstop, water carriers for wet sand, scribes tracking attendance, rations, and output, overseers managing pace and safety, and yes, musicians, men beating time on wooden clappers or drums, creating a rhythmic pulse to guide labor crews. Imagine that. The pyramids were built to a beat. You hear it faintly now, a dull clap, a steady tap, a soft chant that grows and falls like waves. A curiosity from deep excavations. Archaeologists unearth something unusual near the workers' village. Small fragments of reed flutes and wooden clappers that may have been used in work chants. Your curiosity for the section. Some researchers believe labor crews used rhythmic music to synchronize pulling, reducing accidents and maximizing efficiency. Not inspirational hymns, not grand orchestras, just simple work rhythm. Ancient metronomes for ancient labor. Picture 200 men pulling a block. The rope tightens. The clappers strike. 1, 2, 1, 2. A cadence that keeps every footfall aligned. The sound alone makes the impossible feel lighter. A desert of moving lines. Now you imagine the entire pyramid site in motion. Workers move like rivers across the sand. Sledges glide on darkened damp paths. Ropes stretch taut and vibrate like strings on a massive instrument. Water carriers march ahead of each convoy, sprinkling sand in shimmering arcs. Stonecutters send sparks of white dust into the air as pounding stones strike limestone. From your vantage point, the motion is mesmerizing. Tens of thousands of bodies shifting in coordinated patterns. A slow, ancient dance. And just when you think the choreography is perfect, the academic debate enters the picture. Historians still argue whether labor crews worked in 2-month shifts, seasonal rotations, or year-round specialization. Some evidence suggests agricultural workers joined during the Nile flood. Other records imply skilled teams stayed permanently. There is no final consensus. But what matters is the movement. The seamless flow of bodies working together toward one colossal goal. The ropes that held the world. You walk closer and imagine touching one of the ropes used for hauling. A rope as thick as your wrist, made from twisted flax and treated with animal fats for strength. These ropes weren't simple cords. They were engineering lifelines. A single hauling rope might involve hundreds of meters of flax, tens of thousands of fibers, days of twisting and braiding, and teams dedicated to maintenance. If one rope snapped at the wrong moment, the result could be catastrophic. So the Egyptians invented a repair cycle, testing ropes daily, replacing worn sections, and weaving new lengths on the spot. You imagine the rope makers working under a shaded tent, fingers moving swiftly, twisting fibers with the precision of master artisans. They weren't background characters. They were essential, the human conveyor belt. Now the scene grows more vivid, and the air hums in your imagination. Stonecutters shape a block. Haulers drag it toward the base. Setters prepare the surface above. Levelers flatten each new course. Rope crews coil and uncoil new lines. Cooks distribute bread and beer. Physicians tend to blistered hands and strained backs. Water carriers soak the sand. Musicians strike the beat. The entire site becomes a living conveyor belt, a human machine designed to push thousands of stones upward one step at a time. And somehow it works, not because of magic, not because of miracles, but because people kept moving in rhythm, kept cooperating, kept breathing in unison. A soothing vision of motion. You take a deep breath and close your eyes. The sounds fade, then return gently in slow motion. Wooden clappers, the scrape of sled runners, the soft thump of feet, the murmur of chants, the breath of 10,000 workers, all blending into a single heartbeat. This is the sound that raised the pyramids. Not a roar, not a frenzy, just steady human effort in harmonic motion. You open your eyes and watch the pyramid's shadow stretch across the sand like the needle of a sundial. Time moves differently here. Hours blend into days, days into weeks, weeks into decades. And over all that time, the sound of 10,000 hands never stopped. Your journey continues. You move closer to the Great Pyramid again, and this time its height feels overwhelming. Not intimidating, but surreal, like it's too tall to have been built by hands alone. The lower courses seem understandable. Large blocks, wide ramps, teams pulling in unison. But as your eyes travel upward, something shifts. How do they raise the final stones? Hundreds of feet above the desert floor? How do human hands push heavy limestone into the sky? Tonight, in this quiet, unfolding narrative, you're about to witness the moment when the construction process shifts from the plausible to the breathtaking. A warm breeze sweeps across your shoulders, and suddenly the atmosphere feels heavier. Not oppressive, just full of imagined movement. You're standing at the foot of a structure whose top once glistened in the sun with a casing of polished white limestone, capped by a golden pyramidion that caught the light like a star. And now your mind begins climbing. The stepped mountain stage. Once the pyramid rose past the early layers, its outline looked nothing like its final smooth form. You imagine it now. A giant, rising staircase. Terraced, angular, raw. An unfinished mountain. Workers climbed these steps daily, carrying tools, ropes, timbers, baskets of chippings, and jars of water. It was exhausting. It was dangerous, but it was possible. Your well-known historical fact appears here. Archaeological evidence shows that the pyramids were built in horizontal layers, courses, set one atop another like giant stairs. Each course acted as its own workspace. Each workspace had its own teams. Each team pushed blocks slightly higher, block by block, course by course, decade by decade, a quiet, relentless ascent. Raising the upper blocks, the real mystery. You close your eyes and picture the upper third of the pyramid. This is where theories multiply like seeds in the wind. Because the higher the structure rose, the more dramatic the challenge became. The ramps you explored earlier might have worked beautifully for the lower sections. But near the top, the options narrow. And this brings you into the main storyline of this section. How did they lift the stones for the upper layers? You start walking around the pyramid's base as your mind cycles through the possibilities. 1. The shorter, steeper ramps. Some Egyptologists believe the ramps became steeper as the pyramid grew taller. Small, zigzag paths running up the side. Short, straight ramps that hugged one face. Narrow passages carved between rising terraces. Efficient, material light, but dangerous. Imagine workers pulling a multi-ton block up a path only a meter wide, each step hovering above a terrifying drop. A misstep would be fatal, and yet the work continued. 2. Cranes made from wooden A-frames. You picture a wooden frame, simple, sturdy, triangular, anchored to the edge of a course. A block is hauled to the edge using a ramp, then gently lifted with the crane to the next level. This idea has supporters and skeptics. Wood was scarce in Egypt, but not non-existent. Some believe imported cedar from Lebanon could have supported a crane system. Others say the wood wouldn't withstand the load. Still others propose that cranes were only used for small adjustments, not major lifts. And here comes the treasured academic debate line. Historians still argue whether wooden lifting devices were used at all, or whether the Egyptians relied solely on ramps and human muscle. The truth might be both, or neither, or something no one has imagined yet. 3. The lever system. A quieter idea, more elegant, more human scale. A series of levers built into the terrace edge, each raising a stone just a few inches. Then another lever, then another, inching upward, like lifting a heavy couch one step at a time, but with stones the size of cars. Some archaeologists find this compelling. Others consider it too slow for a project of this scale. But the beauty of the lever system lies in its simplicity. No exotic materials, no missing inventions, just physics performed patiently at immense scale. A curiosity, the stone ladder's theory. Now comes a soft curiosity, a detail so oddly practical it almost feels charming. Some researchers suggest the workers built small temporary staircases, stone ladders, setting small blocks next to larger ones so workers could roll or slide heavy stones upward with shorter ramps. It sounds humble, basic, almost improvised, and yet it works in small experiments. It's easy to dismantle, easy to rebuild, a clever trick lost in the noise of grander theories. You imagine a few workers joking as they add another little step to a rising course. A pyramid built by tiny pyramids. A day at the summit. And now your mind lifts you toward the top third of the pyramid. The wind grows stronger. The sun feels closer. The desert stretches endlessly below. The work site is smaller here. Only a few dozen men can fit on each course. You picture the scene. A block arrives on the terrace below. It's pulled close to the edge. Ropes tighten. Wooden beams creak. Men lean back in synchronized motion. 1, 2, 3. The block rises a few centimeters. Then again. Minutes stretch. Sweat drips. Feet dig into the stone. Voices murmur instructions. And finally, the block tilts into place, meeting its neighbors with a soft thud. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just steady. The pyramid grows taller by one heartbeat. The final ascent. You imagine the day the last few blocks were placed. The summit was so high that workers could see the curvature of the Nile, the distant haze of Memphis, and the mountains across the valley. Placing the capstone, the golden pyramid ion, must have been both terrifying and awe-inspiring. There are no surviving records of this moment. No inscriptions, no ceremonies described, just silence. A silence that feels sacred. The capstone caught the sunlight, scattering it across the desert like a second sunrise. And for a moment, the world must have paused. A sleepy descent. You exhale slowly, imagining the wind at the summit brushing your face. The height blurring slightly as you step back down the imaginary terraces. The pyramid grew, not through sleight of hand, not through impossible technology, but through persistence, troubleshooting, trial and error, and 1,000 small lifts repeated endlessly. You look up one last time. The structure feels lighter now, not physically, but emotionally. Every stone is a story. Every tear is a victory. Every shadow a reminder of human hands pushing stone into the sky. And your journey continues. You step toward the northern face of the Great Pyramid, and something subtle shifts in your awareness. After exploring ramps, ropes, workers, and star alignments, you're finally ready to move inside, into the quiet, geometric lungs of the structure. Because the Great Pyramid is not a static mountain of stone, not a monolith, not a giant tomb filled with nothingness. It is a breathing machine, not literally breathing, of course, but expanding, contracting, shifting, equalizing pressure, and balancing weight with astonishing intelligence built directly into its chambers. Tonight, you're going to feel that breath, the slow, ancient inhale, and the quiet exhale of a monument designed to last forever, a hidden skeleton of chambers. You place your hand against the limestone, imagining a wave of cool air passing through the internal corridors. Inside the pyramid lie several key spaces. The descending passage, narrow and steep. The hidden subterranean chamber, carved into the bedrock. The precise ascending passage leading upward. The grand gallery, soaring and dramatic. The queen's chamber, serene and mysterious. And the king's chamber, with its towering granite blocks. But the true marvel is above the king's chamber. A series of stacked cavities called relieving chambers, built to redistribute pressure and prevent the roof from collapsing. Your well-known historical fact for this section arrives right here. The 5 relieving chambers above the king's chamber were constructed using enormous granite beams weighing 40 to 60 tons each, transported from Aswan. These beams don't simply sit there. They function. They flex. They bear weight. They shift microscopically with temperature changes. They breathe. The Grand Gallery, a giant lung. You now imagine walking up the Grand Gallery. Its steep, corbel design rises like a stone throat leading upward. The walls taper gracefully toward the ceiling. Light trickles downward as if sliding over each tier. This space amplifies sound, not loudly, but eerily. Your footsteps echo like drops of water in a cavern. Some Egyptologists believe the gallery acted as the core of an internal lifting system. Others think it served ritual purposes. A few propose it was built for both. As you picture its cavernous interior, you feel an ancient architectural intelligence, a space that channels force, redistributes pressure, and stabilizes the entire structure. It's not a hallway. It's a balancing mechanism, a curiosity hiding in stone. You reach the queen's chamber in your imagination. The air is cooler here, still, quiet. Then your curiosity moment arrives. 2 mysterious narrow shafts extend from the queen's chamber but stop abruptly inside the pyramid, leading nowhere. Not to the outside, not to a ritual chamber, not to any detectable endpoint. Just sealed tunnels. Some think they're symbolic. Some think they were abandoned construction attempts. Some believe they served an unknown astronomical role. Whatever their purpose, they add to the feeling that the pyramid's interior is not random. It is intentional, layered with meaning, layered with engineering. The shafts that stir debate. Now you lean into the required academic debate line, the one that echoes through scholarly articles and late-night research discussions. Historians still argue whether the pyramid's interior shafts functioned as ventilation, spiritual passageways, or weight distribution components. The arguments go like this. Ventilation. The shafts allow airflow, reducing humidity and preserving internal integrity. But some shafts don't reach the outside. Astronomical alignment. They point toward Orion, Draco, Sirius. But angles changed over millennia. Spiritual conduits. They symbolically guide the pharaoh's soul toward the heavens. But why seal some of them? Structural purpose. They reduce stress on blocks and distribute weight. But no ancient texts confirm this. So the mystery remains. But it's not the frustrating kind. It's the soothing kind, woven into the pyramid like hidden breath. The king's chamber, a heart of granite. Now you imagine stepping into the king's chamber. Massive granite walls. A single sarcophagus. Echoes that ring with metallic precision. It feels solemn here, but also technical, like a pressure vessel designed to withstand unimaginable force. The granite beams above shift with temperature. The walls expand and contract. The chamber changes shape by millimeters across seasons. Not enough for humans to see, but enough for the structure to live. This is the engineered breath of the pyramid. Flexing, settling, balancing, enduring. The subterranean chamber, a forgotten intention. Deep beneath your feet lies the subterranean chamber, carved directly in a bedrock. It feels unfinished. Rough walls, uneven floor, no clear purpose. But the act of carving it may have mattered more than its function. Some believe it was the original burial chamber. Others think it was symbolic of the underworld. A few propose it was an emergency relieving chamber. But there is a quiet curiosity often overlooked. The subterranean chamber is cooler and more humid than any part of the pyramid, suggesting it played a role in stabilizing internal airflow and moisture. Like a deep lung, inhaling cool earth and exhaling warm air upward. An unconscious breath, a monument that lives with time. Now you step back mentally, taking in the entire internal structure. Ventilation shafts, weight relief chambers, inclined galleries, hidden corridors. None of these are decorative. None are arbitrary. Together, they create something astonishing. A building that responds to heat, expands with sunlight, contracts overnight, equalizes internal pressure, and stabilizes itself over millennia. You exhale slowly. The pyramid doesn't just endure. It adapts. A sleepy reflection. Your eyes trace the imaginary shafts, the granite beams, the breath of stone. You feel the hush inside this ancient monument. A hush so deep, it's almost like stepping into the chest cavity of a giant, steady creature. There's warmth. There's coolness. There's motion you can't see. A gentle rhythm you can almost hear if you listen closely. This is not a tomb, not a relic, not a static triangle of stone. This is an engineered organism, a living architecture, breathing across 4,500 years. And as you return to the desert sunlight, you feel a soft sense of wonder settle into your chest, soothing and profound. Your journey continues. The sun softens as you move toward the western shadow of the Great Pyramid, and the atmosphere changes again. Not physically, emotionally. There's a quiet gravity here, a sense that the story is shifting from stone and sweat to something deeper, something human, something that lived behind every rope, every ramp, every carved block. Because pyramids weren't just architectural projects. They were political bargains, spiritual promises, and social contracts written not on papyrus, but on the landscape of Egypt itself. Tonight, in this gentle, slow-moving chapter, you're stepping into the mind of a pharaoh and the world that shaped him. The birth of an impossible idea. You imagine Khufu at the start of his reign. Not the stereotypical tyrant from sensational books, but a young king taking control of a flourishing kingdom. He stands on the palace terrace, linen cloak fluttering in the breeze, gazing toward the Giza plateau. The Nile gleams behind him. The priests chant inside the temple. Scribes bustle with scrolls. Royal architects kneel at his feet waiting for orders. And in that moment, Khufu makes a decision that will shape the next 2 decades. He will build something no one has ever built before. Not for vanity, not for intimidation, not even entirely for religion, but because this was the expected duty of a pharaoh, to demonstrate cosmic order. Through monumental creation. This is your well-known historical fact. The pyramids were built as part of a larger belief that the pharaoh maintained universal balance by constructing monuments aligned with the cosmos. Building wasn't just construction. It was cosmic maintenance, a kingdom that must agree. But no pharaoh, no matter how divine, could build such a thing alone. He needed support from priests, nobles, farmers, craftsmen, and the entire bureaucratic system. So Khufu made a bargain, a quiet societal negotiation. In exchange for labor and loyalty, he guaranteed stability, abundance, and cosmic protection. Flood cycles would be interpreted through divine will. Agricultural prosperity would be seen as proof of his legitimacy. Protection from chaos, famine, invasion, disorder would be tied to his relationship with the gods. A grand construction project wasn't just about the afterlife. It was about the present, a national therapy session in stone to reassure people that the world was stable. And you see the logic. A giant pyramid rising from the earth would tell every villager along the Nile. The kingdom is strong, the gods are satisfied, and your life is safe. A curiosity of the royal court. As you walk mentally into the corridors of power, you find something unexpected. A curiosity that feels strangely human. Some ancient payroll records and ration lists found in other Egyptian sites show that royal workers sometimes receive bonuses, extra bread, extra beer, or meat during major construction milestones. Imagine that. A pyramid building bonus program. Ancient employee morale management. Picture a scribe proudly announcing, "Great news! You completed course 47 ahead of schedule. Everyone gets an extra beer jar." You can almost hear the cheers echoing across the desert. The priesthood's role. You stand in the shade cast by the pyramid and imagine a procession of priests approaching the construction site. They're not here to bless the workers. They're here to ensure Khufu's cosmic obligations are fulfilled. The priests believed the pharaoh's pyramid acted like a spiritual lighthouse. Its angles, shafts, and orientation directed the king's spirit toward the stars, not just for his benefit, but for the benefit of the entire kingdom. If the pharaoh reached the heavens successfully, he would intercede with the gods on Egypt's behalf. Your academic debate emerges here. Historians still argue whether the pyramid's religious purpose outweighed its political purpose or whether the two were inseparable. Some scholars say the pyramid was primarily a political statement. Others call it a spiritual machine. Most now admit it was both, because in ancient Egypt, politics and religion were the same river flowing in two channels. A day in Khufu's administration. You imagine the pharaoh meeting with his officials, the vizier overseeing logistics, the chief treasurer managing resources, the high priest interpreting omens, the architects presenting construction progress, the overseers of granaries and herds ensuring food supply, the scribes documenting every number, name, and block movement. The meetings are not mystical. They are managerial. Khufu listens, approves adjustments, authorizes shipments, signs decrees. His leadership is less about divine pronouncements and more about coordination. He is strangely the CEO of the world's largest construction company. The human cost, but also the honor. You continue walking and imagine the worker's perspective. For them, pyramid work wasn't punishment. It was prestige. Their names were written on the blocks. Their teams had mascots and nicknames. Their families gained status. Their tombs, when found, show respect and funerary care. Their bodies show healed injuries, evidence of medical treatment. Building the pyramid wasn't misery. It was participation in eternity. And yet it was hard, grueling, dangerous. Heat stroke, crushed toes, pulled muscles, endless repetition. It wasn't slavery, but it demanded absolute commitment, a devotion that blended faith, pride, and societal momentum. A pharaoh's quiet fear. Here's a thought that softens the image of the pharaoh. What if Khufu feared being forgotten? What if he believed that immortality depended not on belief alone, but on creating something so enormous that the world couldn't possibly ignore it? That fear, that need for memory, is deeply human. You look at the pyramid and feel the echo of that fear fading into the stone. The silent contract. And then you realize something gentle and profound. The pyramid itself is the contract. It says, I protect you in life. You help me in death. Together we maintain the balance of the world. A bargain sealed not with ink, but with 2.3 million blocks of stone. You inhale slowly. The desert is quiet. The wind softens. The sun warms the air around you. And you understand, perhaps for the first time, that pyramids are not just about engineering. They're about trust. A civilization trusting its ruler. A ruler trusting his people. A people trusting their gods. And all of them trusting that this monument would hold the world together. Your journey continues. The wind shifts again as you walk along the southern edge of the Great Pyramid, and suddenly the atmosphere feels different. Not heavier, not colder, but more charged, as if the desert itself knows you're stepping into territory filled with stubborn stories, half-truths, and theories that refuse to disappear. Because the pyramids are not just monuments. They're magnets, pulling myths toward them like iron to a lodestone. And in this long, slow, sleep-bound chapter, you'll stroll through the most persistent legends, conspiracies, and fringe ideas that drift endlessly across documentaries, books, forums, and late-night conversations. Some are charming, some are absurd, some are strangely poetic, and a few, just a few, contain tiny grains of truth buried beneath the sand. Tonight, you'll wander through them all. The allure of the impossible. You stand in the heat, looking up at the pyramid's massive slope, and you understand immediately why myths grow so easily here. It's enormous, perfect, alien in its precision, older than most civilizations. So old it almost feels like it belongs to a different species of humanity. Your mind whispers, surely they couldn't have done this with simple tools. And myths creep into the cracks. You take a step deeper. Myth 1. the lost technology legend. This is the big one. The myth that refuses to die. Ancient laser cutters, anti-gravity devices, sound levitation, secret engines, tools so advanced they've disappeared without a trace. You tilt your head and imagine, just for fun, an Egyptian engineer waving a glowing device, the stone floating obediently into place. It's cinematic, it's dramatic, it's comforting in a strange way. But then your well-known historical fact anchors you. Archaeological evidence overwhelmingly shows that the pyramids were built using stone hammers, copper tools, sledges, levers, and wet sand. Not advanced machinery. No engines. No lasers. No alien toolkits buried under the plateau. Just human determination. Myth 2. Giants built the pyramids. You've heard this one too. The idea that enormous beings, biblical giants, Nephilim, titans, must have moved these stones because humans couldn't. You picture a giant grabbing a limestone block like a toy brick, tossing it neatly into place, humming casually. But here comes your curiosity for the section. Some early travelers sketched Egyptian doorways with exaggerated proportions, and later writers misinterpreted these as proof that giants once lived here. It wasn't evidence. It was artistic distortion. Yet the myth persists, wandering through centuries like a tall ghost. Myth 3. Aliens designed the blueprint. Ah yes, the ancient aliens trope. Triangular structures pointing to the sky. Star alignments. Mystical precision. You imagine a sleek spaceship hovering above the plateau, beaming instructions to baffled farmers. The idea is fun, but it erases something more beautiful. The genius of the ancient Egyptians. And here is the required academic debate line. Historians still argue whether certain architectural choices were intentional or coincidental, but none attribute the design to extraterrestrial involvement. Scholars disagree on symbolic meanings, on the purpose of shafts, on alignment methods, but not one reputable Egyptologist replaces human architects with aliens. Myth 4. The pyramids store energy. This one is oddly soothing. The pyramid as a cosmic battery, a desert power plant, a shape that concentrates Earth energy into healing fields. Some even claim razor blades stay sharp if placed inside a miniature pyramid. You smile at the whimsical absurdity of it, but you also understand its appeal. People want the pyramids to do more than sit there. They want them to resonate. And in a metaphorical sense, they do, but not with electricity. They resonate with human awe. Myth 5. The pyramids were grain silos. This is one of the oldest Western misconceptions, rooted in Roman and medieval interpretations. Even Napoleon's scholars repeated it. Imagine storing grain in a structure with angled walls, no ventilation control, and a complete lack of shelving. The grain would rot within days. Even ancient farmers would have laughed. And yet, the myth lasted over 1,000 years. Why these stories survive? You walk around the pyramid and let the wind push the myths around you like drifting sand. They survive because the pyramids are huge. The construction techniques were forgotten after the Old Kingdom. Ancient Egyptians left few technical manuals. Human minds love mystery. Missing information creates fertile ground for imagination. The pyramids feel supernatural. You pause, placing your hand against the warm limestone. It vibrates with no energy except sunlight and time. But it vibrates with meaning, a curiosity of ancient storytelling. Here's a gentle curiosity fewer people know. Some ancient Egyptians themselves believed earlier pyramids were built by semi-divine beings called the followers of Horus. Even the Egyptians invented their own myths about their ancestors. So myth-making is not modern. It's ancient, organic, human, the soft truth hidden beneath the fantasies. As you continue walking, the desert grows quiet again. It's easy to dismiss these legends, but they reveal something honest. People underestimate ancient humans. They look at massive achievements and assume magic must be involved, or aliens, or giants, or lost civilizations. But the real explanation is more impressive. Regular people, coordinated and determined, built wonders through patience, skill, and generations of knowledge. No myth is more awe-inspiring than that. A sleepy reflection among stories. You sit down in the sand, feeling the pyramid's shadow stretch behind you like a protective wing. The myths drift away softly, like sand blown off old stone. Some stories are fun, some are silly, some are poetic. A few hint at truths wrapped in exaggeration. But none replace the real miracle of human hands. The pyramid stands not because of lost technologies or strange visitors, but because people believed in something larger than themselves and worked together until stone obeyed. The wind settles, the light warms, and your journey continues. The sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, casting long golden shadows across the plateau. You glance away from the pyramid and toward the Nile Valley, toward the living world behind the monument. And suddenly you understand something essential. No pyramid could rise unless an entire city was built to feed it. Not a metaphorical city, a real one. A city of bakers, brewers, herders, scribes, potters, shipwrights, butchers, farmers, and supply managers. Tonight, in this long, soft, ASMR slow chapter, you'll walk through that invisible metropolis. A city whose heartbeat kept the pyramid's heart beating. Because the truth is simple. Stone alone didn't build the Great Pyramid. Food did. The scale of feeding the workforce. You step into the imagined fields along the Nile, lush and green after the annual flood. Cattle graze in enclosures. Goats nibble reeds. Barley sways in shimmering rows. Fishermen haul in nets heavy with Nile perch. The pyramid needed workers, and the workers needed food. And that food required an ecosystem bigger than most ancient cities. Your well-known historical fact for this section arrives here. Archaeologists found remains of cattle, sheep, and goats showing that workers consumed thousands of animals per year, far more than an ordinary village, proving an industrial-scale food system. The city behind the workers wasn't an afterthought. It was the engine, a daily menu fit for a builder. You imagine stepping into a bustling kitchen courtyard near the workers' village. Clay ovens glow like miniature suns. Women and men knead dough with practiced movements. Beer brews in tall ceramic jars, foam bubbling over. The air is thick with heat, grain dust, and the smell of roasting meat. A typical daily ration for a pyramid worker included thick loaves of barley bread, 2 to 4 liters of beer, nutrient-rich, not the modern kind. Onions, garlic, leeks, dried fish, fresh or dry dates, meat on special days or as bonuses, clean water stored in large pottery jars. Every bite was calculated. Every jar was counted. Every loaf had a purpose, a curiosity hidden in a jar. Now comes your curiosity moment. Some excavated beer jars show residue with traces of specific herbs, suggesting Egyptians flavored worker beer to help prevent illness. Imagine that. A workforce fueled by ancient, mildly medicinal craft beer. You smile at the thought. A brewery with a health plan. The network behind the city. But the food didn't magically appear. It demanded a huge, coordinated supply network. You picture caravans arriving every morning. Cattle driven in from Delta farms. Wagon loads of onions and garlic. Boats unloading barley and emmer grain. Baskets of fish wrapped in woven palm leaves. Jars of milk and cheese from desert herders. Piles of fuel wood for ovens. Fresh pottery for storage. Rope bundles for hauling. And endless water from the Nile. Every resource flowed toward Giza like a bloodstream feeding a single heart. A city feeding an impossible dream. The scribes who counted everything. You walk slowly past an imagined row of scribes seated cross-legged on mats. Their scrolls form long, neat lines of hieratic script. Each number marks a ration, a worker, a shipment. A scribe reads aloud. 50 jars of beer to Crew A. 30 loaves to the rope makers. 10 cattle for the monthly feast. He dips his reed, pen, and ink and continues writing. A single miscalculation could leave an entire team hungry and halt construction. The scribes were the accountants of the Old Kingdom, and their math mattered, the logistics that rival modern cities. Modern project managers love to marvel at this, and for good reason. What you're imagining now is an ancient supply chain with procurement teams, storage managers, distribution crews, quality inspectors, transport contractors, inventory scribes, ration overseers, livestock handlers, all working in sync. Your academic debate appears here. Historians still argue whether this massive supply effort was coordinated from a central royal command or distributed among regional governors. Some evidence supports a centralized system. Others suggest a mix. And some think local leaders donated supplies as acts of loyalty. The truth, like most in Egypt, may lie somewhere in between. The breweries of the desert. You now imagine stepping into one of the giant brewery courts. Rows of vats bubble. Workers stir mixtures of water, grain, and yeast with long paddles. The smell is rich, nutty, alive. Egyptian beer wasn't like modern beer. It was thick, nourishing, calorie-dense. A meal in a cup, and it was vital. Beer hydrated workers in the heat. Beer provided vitamins missing from grain. Beer kept morale high. Beer built pyramids. A pyramid is, among many things, a monument to brewing. The farms that never slept. You turn away from the ovens and the breweries and imagine the farms themselves. During the annual inundation, the land became fertile beyond belief. After the floodwaters receded, workers plowed the enriched soil. Teams harvested grain. Boats carried supplies to Giza. The rhythm of the Nile determined the rhythm of construction. When the river was generous, the city thrived. When the river faltered, the project slowed. And every Egyptian knew why. The pharaoh's pyramid was tied to the pharaoh's destiny. And, through him, the destiny of Egypt. The festival meals. You picture a special feast day near the workers' village. Huge cattle roasted on spits. Barley bread stacked high like bricks. Children laughing. Musicians playing clappers and flutes. Workers receiving extra rations as rewards for progress. This wasn't just sustenance. It was community. Celebration. A way to remind every worker that they belonged to something grand. The pyramid as a consumer. You turn back to the Great Pyramid and finally understand. It didn't just demand stone. It demanded fields, herds, fisheries, workshops, bakeries, breweries, granaries, caravans, boats, entire towns of workers. An empire's worth of organization. A city fed the pyramid, and the pyramid fed the city's sense of purpose. A sleepy reflection at sunset. You sit quietly as the daylight fades. The wind grows cooler. The desert softens into blue and lavender. You feel the hum of a city that no longer exists, but once fed the most ambitious building project on Earth. This was not just engineering. It was nourishment, not just architecture, but agriculture, not just stone, but sustenance. The pyramid rose because Egypt itself rose to support it. And as the horizon glows one last time before dusk, your journey continues. The desert grows cooler as you move farther from the pyramid's base, and the wind picks up just enough to lift a fine layer of sand around your ankles. The light shifts, less golden now, more amber, drifting slowly toward the colors of evening. And this is the perfect atmosphere for Section 16, because you're stepping into a part of pyramid history that scholars whisper about and documentaries sensationalize. The arguments, disagreements, academic feuds, and uncomfortable questions that swirl like dust around the Great Pyramid. Not conspiracy theories. You did those already. This chapter is about the real debates. The ones serious researchers have been wrestling with for decades, even centuries. Some of these debates are friendly. Some are fierce. Some have split conferences in half. And a few, just a few, are considered academic heresy. Tonight, you'll wander through all of them. The timeline question. You stop at a rocky ledge overlooking the plateau. The Great Pyramid glows beneath you in the fading light. Most people don't know this, but even something as basic as the date of construction carries a faint shadow of controversy. Your well-known historical fact enters now. Conventional Egyptology dates the Great Pyramid to around 2580 to 2560 BCE during Khufu's reign. This date is supported by pottery shards, quarry marks, worker graffiti, radiocarbon samples, historical king lists. But then, there's the heresy. Some fringe but academically trained researchers argue that radiocarbon dates from some pyramid mortar samples show slightly older ranges, centuries older, fueling speculation that earlier structures may have existed at Giza before Khufu. Mainstream scholars reject this strongly, pointing out contamination factors and natural variability in radiocarbon dating. But the debate lingers like a dust cloud that refuses to settle. The water damage mystery. Now you step toward the Sphinx and glance back at the plateau. The weathering patterns on the enclosure walls whisper something strange, something scholars still wrestle with. Some stones show rounded erosion patterns more consistent with heavy rainfall than wind-driven sand. This introduces your curiosity for the section. A small but vocal group of geologists argue that parts of the Giza Plateau show signs of water erosion dating to periods before the Sahara became desert. If true, this would push certain structures earlier than traditionally believed. But mainstream Egyptologists counter that. Groundwater movement, salt exfoliation, microclimates, ancient floods could explain the patterns. The debate isn't a battle. It's a slow, simmering disagreement. Polite in tone, explosive in implication. The precision problem. You now approach the pyramid's casing stones, or rather, the few that remain. The joints between blocks are astonishingly tight, some so precise that credit card thin blades can barely slip between them. This precision inspires awe and questions. Your academic debate line here emerges naturally. Historians still argue whether the extraordinary precision of the casing stones indicates advanced tools or simply meticulous craftsmanship at an immense scale. Some engineers marvel at the angular accuracy and claim it hints at techniques not yet fully understood. Others dismiss this, noting that careful manual work over decades can achieve incredible results. The debate remains unresolved, not conspiratorial, just deeply technical. The internal void. A cool gust brushes your cheek, and your thoughts drift upward into the pyramid's unseen spaces. In 2017, researchers used muon radiography, cosmic ray scanning, to study the pyramid's mass distribution. They found something unexpected, a large, empty anomaly above the Grand Gallery. A void, rectangular, triangular, unknown. Its purpose remains mysterious. Some scholars say it's a construction gap. Others propose a relieving space. A few even suggest it may be a hidden chamber. And this introduces your next soft debate. Was the void intentional, structural, symbolic, accidental, a side effect of architectural choices? Nobody agrees. Nobody pretends to. The void is a quiet heresy, a whisper inside the stone. The king's chamber question. You imagine standing again inside the king's chamber. The granite blocks tower above you like silent guardians. This chamber is strange, too large for a burial room, too austere for ritual, too engineered to be merely symbolic. Some researchers propose it wasn't just a tomb, but a resonant chamber, a space whose dimensions create unusual acoustic patterns. But mainstream scholars shake their heads. No ancient text describes acoustic use. No ritual manuals mention sound. No precedent exists in Old Kingdom tombs. Yet the hum persists, the faint metallic resonance. When you tap a wall with your knuckle, the Sphinx alignment puzzle. Just beyond the pyramid, the Sphinx rests like a dreaming guardian. Its gaze is fixed due east toward the sunrise. But here comes another quiet storm. Why is the Sphinx's head disproportionately small compared to its body? Some argue it was recarved from an older, larger lion statue. Others say it was designed that way intentionally. A few suggest it was carved in stages by different crews. Every answer leads to another question. The unfinished features. You now picture faint corridors, unstarted tunnels, half-carved passages below the pyramid. Some seem abandoned. Others lead nowhere. Were they experiments? False starts? Symbolic attempts? Hidden features? This is the gentle academic heresy. Egyptologists dislike words like unfinished because nothing in Egyptian construction was random. But some features are undeniably puzzling. Incomplete, pausing at the edge of meaning, the human side of controversy. And now you imagine the Egyptologists themselves, scholars pacing conference halls, gesturing at charts, debating politely or not so politely, comparing erosion patterns, arguing over orientation angles, laughing at outlandish theories, while fiercely debating subtle ones. It's oddly comforting. The pyramid isn't just a structure. It's a conversation, one that will outlive us all, a sleepy reflection among questions. You sit down in the sand. The pyramid glows with the last warmth of the day. The debates drift around you like gentle gusts of wind. Not frustrating, not frightening, just eternal. Some questions will never be answered. Some will never be settled. Some will never stop surprising the world. But that's part of the pyramid's magic. It is complete, yet unfinished. Known, yet unknowable. Studied, yet mysterious. And as you rise slowly, brushing sand from your hands, you feel the soft thrill of standing inside a cloud of questions that scholars will chase for centuries. Your journey continues. The desert has shifted into its evening palette. Lavender shadows, amber dunes, the faint blue hush that settles when the sun lowers behind the plateau. You turn away from the Great Pyramid and look toward the horizon, where the silhouettes of other pyramids rest in long, soft lines. And tonight, in this quiet chapter, you'll feel something different. The moment when Egypt's golden momentum subtly faltered, when the perfection of Khufu's masterpiece cast a long shadow over everything that followed. Because after Khufu, the echo changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, but undeniably. A kingdom still building, but not the same. You walk toward Khufu's pyramid, glowing in the dusk. At first glance, it looks almost equal to Khufu's, tall, sharp, majestic. But as you step closer, you notice details. Slightly rougher stonework, different angle, less precision in casing alignment, more visible core structure. Still extraordinary, still monumental, but not the same. Your well-known historical fact arrives gently here. Khufu's pyramid is smaller than Khufu's, but appears taller because it was built on higher ground. A clever trick of landscape, a royal illusion, not cosmic precision, just courtly politics and architectural confidence. You can almost hear Khufu telling his architects, "Make it look taller." That's all that matters. Even pharaohs had egos. The slow decline of perfection. You continue walking south toward Menkaur's pyramid. It is dignified but clearly smaller, just 1/10 the volume of Khufu's. The casing blocks are exquisite, made of granite rather than limestone, but the structure itself feels scaled down. Not weaker, just more realistic. Something had changed in Egypt. Resources, ambition, political unity, maybe all three. You kneel beside a fallen casing block and trace its smooth, polished face. It's beautiful, but the overall design marks a turning point. Egypt no longer chased the impossible. It settled for the magnificent, a curiosity in abandonment. Here comes your curiosity for this section. Archaeologists found that part of Menkaur's granite casing was abandoned mid-process. Uncut blocks left unfinished, as if workers suddenly stopped and never returned. It's not a myth. It's right there in the stone. A snapshot of ancient deadlines missed forever. Why did they stop? Some say Khufu's son died unexpectedly. Others say political turmoil interrupted the work. Some imagine shifting priorities or dwindling resources. Whatever the reason, the unfinished granite blocks feel like ancient footprints, a reminder that even in Egypt, some dreams remained incomplete. The pyramid builders lose momentum. As you gaze across the plateau, the story broadens. Khufu, gigantic. Khufu, impressive. Menkaur, elegant but smaller. Then, as you picture the pyramids that came later, at Abu Sir, Saqqara, Dashur, the decline becomes clearer. Rushed construction, weaker masonry, smaller base, core structures made with rubble instead of cut stone, sinking foundations, misaligned corners, collapsing outer layers. Your required academic debate line appears naturally now. Historians still argue whether the decline in pyramid quality was caused by economic strain, political change, labor shortages, or a shift in religious priorities. Some blame leadership. Some blame logistics. Some blame revolutions in burial customs. No single answer satisfies everyone, but the evidence speaks softly, like a sigh carried on wind. Something fundamental shifted. The rise of the valley temples. You move closer to the remains of Khufu's Valley Temple, its colossal limestone blocks and polished granite pillars gleaming even in twilight. And you realize something important. The focus of architecture was changing. Less energy went into pyramid perfection, and more into causeways, valley temples, mortuary complexes, elaborate ritual halls, statue production, ceremonial pathways. The energy of Egypt moved horizontally instead of vertically. Cosmic mountains gave way to earthly temples. A shift of priorities, a shift of vision, a shift of statecraft. The bureaucratic evolution. You imagine scribes with more paperwork, land records, tax rolls, temple offerings, ritual inventories. The old kingdom was becoming more complex, more administrative, more decentralized. Power that once focused on a single massive pyramid began to spread through layers of the court and priesthood, and architecture changed with it. The quiet symbolism. You now look at Menkaur's pyramid again, and something soft becomes clear. Smaller does not mean less meaningful. Its temple was more intricate. Its statues were masterpieces. Its symbolism more intimate. Perhaps Egypt realized something profound. Bigger doesn't always mean better. Sometimes shorter can be stronger. Sometimes detail outshines scale. A kingdom grows wiser as it grows older. A civilization adjusts its identity. You now imagine Egypt decades after the Giza project. The memory of Khufu's glory lingers, but the practical needs of the nation evolve. You see, farmers needing more land, administrators needing more staff, temples needing more offerings, priests demanding more influence, local governors rising in authority, a population growing and diversifying. The pyramid as sovereign symbol was becoming less central. Other concerns took its place. A sleepy reflection on changing echoes. You sit on a quiet ridge overlooking the three great pyramids. The sky deepens to purple-blue. Stars begin to appear, shimmering faintly above the ancient stones. And now you hear it, the echo of ages shifting. Khufu's thunderous ambition, Khufu's measured pride, Menkaur's graceful restraint. Each pyramid a verse in a poem that slowly changed meter. The perfection of Giza did not persist forever. It wasn't meant to. Every civilization outgrows its own monuments. But each structure carries its own whisper. After me, the echo will change. And with that whisper settling warmly inside you, your journey continues. You wake, slowly, softly, inside the imagination of ancient time. A pale glow touches the eastern horizon, and for a moment the desert looks exactly as it did 4,500 years ago. No tourists, no cities, no noise but the breath of wind across open sand. You stand facing the Great Pyramid in the stillness before dawn, and as the first sliver of sunlight breaks across the horizon, you witness something few people think about. Every pyramid had a last sunrise, a final morning when it was still the center of Egypt's world, a last moment of glory before centuries of storms, sand, neglect, plunder, and shifting dynasties pulled the spotlight away. Tonight, in this soft, slow, sleep-scented chapter, you will watch the Great Pyramid's last sunrise. Not the literal last, but the symbolic end of its age. Because even mountains of stone do not hold the world's attention forever. A dawn the builders never saw. You watch the first light touch the pyramid's golden capstone, the pyramidion that once crowned it, reflecting sunlight like a second sun. For a brief instant, the structure glows so brightly that it almost feels alive. But here comes your well-known historical fact. The Great Pyramid originally shone with polished Tura limestone casing stones, forming a brilliant white surface visible for miles. Imagine that. A radiant mountain, a beacon of perfection. But by the time of Egypt's Middle Kingdom, centuries after Khufu, much of that casing had already begun to loosen, crack, or be repurposed for other buildings. A sunrise of fading brilliance. The slow retreat of a legend. You sit down in the sand, listening to the desert breathe, and imagine the years passing like drifting grains. Winds sharpen edges. Sand scours surfaces. Blocks settle. Earthquakes nudge joints. Priests leave. Guards disperse. Rituals fade. New rulers rise. New priorities replace old ones. The pyramid never stops existing, but stops being central. Stops dictating the rhythm of daily life. Stops receiving offerings, festivals, prayers. It becomes background. Magnificent background, but background nonetheless. A curiosity from the Middle Kingdom. Now comes your curiosity moment, a detail many people never hear. Middle Kingdom inscriptions show that travelers visited Giza out of nostalgia, calling the pyramids monuments of the ancestors, already ancient in their time. Imagine that. Tourists existed 4,000 years before modern tourism. Families took boats upriver just to look at old wonders and say, people long ago were incredible. That's how old the pyramids are. Older than nostalgia itself. The age of reuse. You watch centuries drift by, and the pyramid becomes a quarry. Not maliciously, not disrespectfully, just practically. Cities needed stone. Temples needed renovation. Palaces rose. Walls collapsed. Earthquakes damaged structures. And the pyramids, eternal as they were, provided the hardest, most perfectly cut limestone in the region. Your academic debate line emerges as naturally as the dawn. Historians still argue whether casing stones were removed intentionally by builders or stripped centuries later during periods of instability and rebuilding. Some say deliberate removal during medieval construction. Others say earthquake damage caused cascading collapse. Some blame both. Regardless of cause, the smooth, shining skin of the pyramid slowly vanished, leaving the rough core exposed. A relic inside a relic. The priests who stay behind. Not everyone left. You imagine a handful of priests, centuries after Khufu, still tending to small altars near the pyramid base, still lighting incense, still reciting ancestral hymns. But fewer and fewer came. Generations passed. Funds dwindled. The state shifted priorities. And eventually, even these last caretakers left, their footsteps fading into sand. A ritual without worshippers becomes a memory. Foreign eyes on ancient stone. You now watch as foreign dynasties take power. The Hyksos, then the early New Kingdom, then the empire builders. To them, the pyramids were reminders of a past too distant to fully grasp. They honored them, visited them, copied their symbolism, but they did not rebuild them. They were shadows, not blueprints. Later still, the Persians came, then the Greeks, then the Romans, then Byzantine rulers, then Islamic dynasties. Each one stared at the pyramids with awe, but also disconnection. A wonder without context is a wonder half understood. The last true sunrise. Now the story returns to light. You imagine one dawn, no exact date, but somewhere deep in antiquity, when the Great Pyramid's capstone shines brightly for the last time. Maybe it cracked that very afternoon. Maybe it was stolen decades later. Maybe it collapsed during an earthquake. No scholar knows. But in the poetry of time, every monument has a last moment when it lives the way it was meant to live. A final sunrise fully reflected. A final glow across the desert. A final gasp of perfection before erosion begins its slow, patient work. You exhale, and the breeze cools your back. A desert that forgets nothing. The desert buries. The desert erases. But the desert also preserves. Even as casing stones fell. Even as corridors filled with sand. Even as inscriptions vanished. The core survived. Not because it was indestructible, but because it was perfectly balanced. Stones leaning against one another with flawless engineering. The pyramid didn't resist time. It cooperated with it. That's why it still stands. A sleepy reflection on impermanence. The wind softens. The horizon glows. The last sunlight touches the stones like a blessing. Nothing lasts. Not rulers. Not priesthoods. Not religions. Not dynasties. Not even mountains of limestone. And yet, some things last long enough to remind us that human hands can shape eternity. For a little while, the Great Pyramid is one of those things. And as the last rays fade and evening wraps the plateau in deep blue, your journey continues. Night settles slowly across the Giza Plateau, not as a curtain, but as a soft veil drifting down in gentle layers. The sand cools beneath your feet. The air grows still, and the Great Pyramid, once glowing gold in sunlight, now becomes a silhouette, a quiet mountain of memory against a deep blue sky. This is the final chapter of your journey tonight, a slow, whispering descent into stillness, a letting go of questions, theories, debates, and history itself, until only calm remains. Because the truth is simple. If monuments can sleep, this is the hour the pyramids fall asleep too. The plateau at night. You step gently across the moonlit sand. The desert sounds different now. Slower, rounder, softer. Every footstep sinks into a hush. Every exhale disappears into cool air. In the daytime, the pyramids demand attention. At night, they ask for silence. You pause and watch shadows stretch across ancient stone. The shape of the pyramid softens, its edges fading into the sky until it looks less like architecture and more like a dream of a structure. Something imagined, half remembered, half asleep, the memory of hands. You close your eyes and the echoes return, but slowly now like warm ripples in your mind. The sound of chisels, the rhythm of clappers, the murmur of rope crews, the laughter in workers' villages, the scrape of sled runners across wet sand. And then, as if carried away by the wind, the sounds fade, the workers vanish, the ramps dissolve, the tools rest. Only the pyramid remains, a monument standing in the hollow of the night, warm memories cooling beneath moonlight, a curiosity of stillness. In this soft darkness, you encounter your final curiosity. Researchers have recorded that temperatures inside parts of the pyramid remain surprisingly stable, barely shifting across seasons, almost like a giant stone clock that refuses to rush. Even now, even after millennia, the pyramid keeps its own slow pulse, a rhythm, a breath, a quiet heartbeat of stone, the weight of stars. You lift your gaze toward the sky. The stars look sharper here, brighter, more ancient. Maybe it's the desert dryness. Maybe it's imagination. Maybe it's the simple fact that you're standing where astronomer priests once measured eternity by sky maps drawn in starlight. Orion rises slowly above the horizon. Sirius flickers like a tiny flame. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like powdered silver. And for a moment, it becomes impossible to tell where the pyramid ends and the sky begins. The structure seems to merge with the stars, as if remembering its cosmic origins, not from aliens or lost technology, but from human beings who looked upward and decided to build something worthy of the heavens. The debate dissolves. All the questions that stirred earlier, the voids, the erosion patterns, the shafts, the ramps, the workers, the politics, all grow quiet now. In history, debates matter. In the soft exhale of night, they don't. Because tonight isn't about the mysteries. Tonight is about the calm that settles. When you stop trying to solve something and simply let it be, the pyramid doesn't ask to be explained. It asks to be witnessed, to be felt, to be allowed to rest. A pharaoh's whisper. You imagine Khufu, not as a ruler issuing commands, but as an old man near the end of his life. He stands on a palace balcony, leaning on a cane, watching his pyramid glow under a full moon. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. The monument is his final breath, his lasting whisper, his quiet promise to the world that human hands, when working side by side, can create something that defies time. Then Khufu fades too. Like every worker, every scribe, every rope maker, every priest, every generation that followed. But the pyramid remains. Quiet, patient, breathing, a desert that rocks you to sleep. You sit down on the cooling sand. A faint breeze brushes your cheek. The night is deepening into soft velvet. The entire story, from stone quarries to star alignments, from ramps to rituals, from myths to mathematics, begins to settle inside you, like dust falling in slow motion. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels heavy. It all becomes weightless. All becomes calm. Your breath finds the rhythm of the desert. Slow, shallow, steady. And the pyramid becomes a companion in stillness. A mountain of quiet watching over your drowsy thoughts. A sleepy refrain. You let your head tilt slightly. Your shoulders loosen. Your eyelids grow warm and heavy. And the refrain drifts into your mind. Soft, slow, lulling. You are safe here. You are calm here. You can rest now. Over and over. Like the desert wind repeating itself. Across thousands of years. The pyramids fall asleep. At last, you imagine the Great Pyramid closing its ancient eyes, its sharp edges softening, its breath sinking deeper, its stones settling into the cradle of the desert. A monument asleep, a world at rest, and you, drifting gently with it. You lie back on the sand. Stars shimmer above you. The night sighs, and everything becomes quiet. Everything becomes slow. Everything becomes soft. There is nothing to solve, nothing to worry about. Nothing left to carry. Just a long, gentle exhale, spreading through your body, like the desert cooling after sunset. Your journey, for now, is complete. Sweet dreams.